has already been in part described by an earlier speaker, and more will be said on that. It really is an affront to democratic, civilized human values that the world is standing by while Gaza is being systematically starved. Children, women, men are deprived of the means of mobility and the means of actually feeding themselves adequately. Clean water is called for in Gaza, not a siege of Gaza. And the Israeli government, when asked to justify the siege of Gaza, referred to the precedent of the economic boycott against South Africa in that great struggle for liberation, and said they were drawing on that in order to justify what they were doing in Gaza. We, in Jews for Justice for Palestinians, say none of this is in our name, as Jews committed to human rights, democracy and freedom for all peoples without distinction, and foremost for the Palestinians in the situation they face today. The situation in the West Bank is unfortunately not idyllic either. While the Israeli government talks of peace, while there are supposed negotiations with President Abbas following Annapolis, there is an extension of the settlement process. There is a deepening of the occupation. There is a deepening of the control of Palestinian movement within the West Bank. The checkpoint system, 3 are demolished here, another 7 are erected there. There are over 600 blocks of one kind or another in the West Bank. No more than 28, I believe, actually on the border with Israel. The rest of these blocks within the West Bank are to stop Palestinians moving from one part of the West Bank to another. There is the extension of the so-called separation wall, to the west of which many, many Palestinians live with virtually no longer any rights even to remain in their own residences. And Palestinians in the rest of the West Bank are not allowed to go and visit them, nor are they allowed to go into the Jordan Rift Valley, where there are some 50,000 Palestinians and 9,000 Israeli settlers, about a third of the West Bank. This too is the special reserve of the Israeli occupation. So the situation facing the Palestinians is difficult. The peace negotiations, I have to tell you, though I'm sure you know it already, are going nowhere. In these difficult times, we have to stand with and affirm our solidarity with the Palestinians and support them in whatever ways we can, in whatever they do. For instance, their regular peaceful protests at Bilin village against the separation wall, where hundreds of Israeli protesters go every week to join with the Palestinians in the village to protest against the wall which is stealing Palestinian land. What we're witnessing is a land grab across the whole of the West Bank, and we have got to stand out and stand firm and let our voices be raised against it. At the same time, what we in Jews for Justice for Palestinians do is try to give voice to those dissident voices within Israel which speak out against the occupation. There is an exhibition over there at the back of the rally where some of these organizations have been foregrounded. ICAD, the Israeli Campaign Against House Demolitions, spoke. Linda Ramsden from ICAD spoke earlier about the work they did. There are all kinds of groups through whom we get knowledge of what is actually going on in the ground. Human rights organizations like B'Tselem, which monitors human rights in the occupied territories, like Rabbis for Human Rights, who go across to help Palestinians with the oil harvest and give them protection against settlers who try to steal the fruits of their labor. Physicians for Human Rights, who go and treat Palestinians in Gaza and elsewhere on the West Bank. There are organizations of Palestinians within Israel itself, Palestinian citizens of Israel, citizens, yes, but still struggling for their rights because of the discrimination they suffer within what is called laughably the only democratic state in the Middle East. We support all these organizations and we call on you to do the same. We also have to take on the arguments that we encounter within the Jewish community, but also more widespreadly, as to why Israel is right and the rest of the world is wrong on this issue. The security argument for Israel. There is a right for Israeli security, but the only way, in our view, that Israel will have security is by negotiating a just peace with the Palestinians, which means ending the occupation now. That is the only basis on which one can envisage peace in the Middle East.